Well, first and foremost, I think that the important message that's come across to me in the last few days of this IPU conference and the Women's Conference, which preceded the main speakers conference, is that there is so much that is going on in terms of promoting women, not only in Parliament but also in life in general, that there are many, many, many different strands. It seems to me that the real importance of these kind of occasions is the opportunity to bring together those different voices from many, many different sort of areas of endeavour in order to have a collective voice. One of the opening speeches of the Women's Conference was very much to do with saying that we are stronger together, as it were, and so therefore, there are a lot of individual efforts, but we need a forum every now and then whereby we can put our voices together and insist on changes to the agenda, which has been happening in the last few years. Of that there is no doubt. You asked me about whether the format is the appropriate one. I think that there are some areas which could perhaps have a little bit more attention. In particular, I think that there are so many women at this conference who have got individual experience of successful programs in their own countries which have been successful in promoting women, particularly bringing women from perhaps local, even village areas through to central areas. And I'm not sure that we have adequate opportunity for those women to express their views and their experience in order to be able to share it with others. So I think that in future it would be rather nice if we could have 1 or 2 really key workshops in which women can talk about sort of what has worked in their particular regions and what hasn't. One of the things that does also, I think, occur to me is that at conferences like this, speakers' conferences, women's conferences, we're talking really about politics at the central level. But politics is much, much wider than that. Politics is what we do at the most local levels. I'm reminded very much of a recent story where one of my grandsons wanted to change a custom in his school whereby boys should be allowed to wear 1 earring. And what he did was to get together a petition. He got 134 signatures from boys and put it to the headmaster. I don't know the outcome of it yet, but that is an example of politics. That is politics. It's bringing people together in order to achieve a common cause. And politics is a very, very broad issue. So I think that if we begin to start thinking of women acting at the most local level and enabling and empowering women to act at the local level, that in turn will produce a better sort of pool for women parliamentarians to emerge, because politics is not just Parliament. One of the other areas which I think has been impressive and is now very firmly on the agenda. When I say on the agenda, I don't mean in any formal sense. I mean it's something that people have incorporated into their own thinking, therefore it has become a sort of truism, is that there is a very big difference between government and Parliament, and that we must constantly, as parliamentarians, remind governments that they have very different kind of powers, but they are essentially accountable to Parliament in democracies. And there are often assumptions made by governments in a somewhat arrogant way that they can manipulate Parliament, and I think we have to be ever vigilant about that. But I think that what your area of concern much more is to do with how we recruit more women. There are many countries attending this conference where the percentage of women in parliaments is extraordinarily low. 3%, 4%, 5%, even 6%. 4% in the case of Iran. I think it's 3% in the case of Nigeria. So we've got a long, long way to go. And one of the questions that one has to ask oneself is, why is it important for women to be involved in politics? What do they bring? Well, I mean, the answer to that is very simple, that women make up half of the population. Therefore, the sort of political dialogue is incomplete unless women are contributing to the same extent that they exist in the same percentage they exist in the population. So the dialogue is incomplete without women. And it seems ridiculous that we have reached the 21st century where women are still fighting in many, many democratic countries to have a political voice at the sort of central parliamentary level. And I think that the forums such as these give women, and they expose what the facts are, but they also give women the confidence to believe that they too can achieve that status of being a woman parliamentarian and making decisions which affect not only womankind but also mankind in general. So it is very important that we get together. And I was thinking this morning that there are an awful lot of countries that arrive at these conferences and they say sort of set piece, maybe that something's been agreed with the government and it's all about giving facts and statistics about what they've achieved. And that can become a little formulaic at times. But what is important is that this is a forum, and I think that there are many, many meetings and connections and networks which are made in the margins of meetings such as this, which are hugely, hugely important. I think that it's not only women who would argue this, but men also, I hope, would argue this, that politics is also about people and the kind of relationships that you make with people. And there have been many an occasion in politics when, really quite major conflicts have been resolved because of personal relationships between individuals. And, that happens here in conferences such as the one we're having at the moment in New York, the IPU conference. And I think that, there is a network of women parliamentarians. What we now need to do is to follow up on that incipient network, as it were, and to strengthen it and to make it real. And indeed to be able to support women parliamentarians in those parliaments where they're not adequately represented, in order to help them to perhaps introduce legislation which is women-friendly, practices which are women-friendly, having proper sort of hours. I was recently in the Far East, and one in a country where the percentage of women in the parliament was actually rather low, and one of the issues that women consistently talked about was the work ethic amongst parliamentarians, which meant that those who wish to succeed in politics put in the longest hours. And that's clearly very difficult for women if they wish to combine a family. And many of the women said that they chose not to have a family because it was incompatible with a career. So there are many areas of good practice where I think we can support women, and that will happen. That is coming, certainly in the UK. It's a much more women-friendly parliament in the last 10 years than it has been before in terms of the hours. And we have a creche in the parliament, and there are many parliamentarians, women parliamentarians, who have babies that they're still feeding, and there is provision for that. So we are beginning to be aware of how much we must change practice, which is after all very male-oriented, and become more female-oriented.